Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, I do like to remind you to please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So I'm sure you can tell by the title of this episode what we're going to be discussing today, and that is the December 2018 Atlantic cover story piece titled The Sex Recession by Kate Julian. And unlike normally when I do these sorts of episodes, I actually really, really like this piece. Like, this was something that I read it when it first hit online, and then I waited until after, like, the actual paper copies of the December 2018 issue of The Atlantic hit newsstands, so I could read it again, because it is a cover story, so it is kind of more long form, but it was one of those that I really wanted a chance to, like, sit down and reread and, like, mark up and kind of go through, because this is a topic that I'm interested in the way that I'm interested in what the hell has gone wrong with the kids. And I know every generation kind of goes through this where we look at the younger generation and wonder what the hell is wrong with you kids. But I think there has been a very fundamental change in how I was raised, and I'm 37 years old. I'm an exennial. But the difference between like boomers to Gen Xers to millennials to Gen Z slash iGen slash whatever the hell you want to call this new bumper crop of kids going into college now. And just as a side note, before we get too far into this, a lot of things get blamed on millennials that don't necessarily belong on millennials. Like the current college campus situation, everybody says millennials. It's not millennials. It's the generation after them that is really the focus of what's going on right now on college campuses, and just in general, like this shift that has happened between how that generation was raised versus how all of the rest of us was raised, and the ways in which it has fundamentally changed how these young people have grown into adults and how they act as adults now. So this in particular is about sex, obviously, which, to go ahead and just preface this off the rip, yes, this is going to have a lot of sexual discussions, so forewarned is forearmed. I will always, as usual, try to keep it on this side of TMI for my own life, but yes, there will be discussions of a sexual nature happening, because obviously that's the topic that we're talking about today. And what this piece is about is Kate Julian did a whole bunch of research, like talked to actual young people, psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical physicians, just pretty much anybody you can possibly think of, to try to figure out like what in the world is going on with these young kids sexually. And kind of the jump off point for that is this idea that keeps getting touted, and it's true, but it gets presented in this very positive light, which I don't really think it should be. And that's this idea that teenagers are having less sex than they were in generations past, and obviously therefore it's resulting in less teen pregnancy, which that's good, but everybody kind of heralds this lack of sex amongst teenagers as a good thing, and I'm like, no, I don't think that's such a great thing. And Julian has gone through, and I mean, through her research, she's pretty much heard every excuse in the book for why things are the way they are, but she's narrowed it down to 5 causes that she heard the most in doing her research. So that's kind of her focus on this, and she breaks it down through each of the 5 causes and gives backup information on it, anecdotal studies, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and kind of start getting into that. So the first topic she discusses is sex for one, which obviously we are talking about onanism slash masturbation slash sex for one. And a stat that she starts out this section with is one that really shocked me, because I knew, like, I knew this was a thing, but I didn't realize how prevalent this was. And that is that 60% of adults under the age of 35 do not have a spouse or a partner. And that within that group, 1 in 3 of them live with their parents. Now, obviously, if 60% of a group of people don't have somebody to have sex with, then obviously sex isn't really going to be happening. And it's really, really not going to be happening if you don't have a partner and you still live with your parents. Because how in the world are you supposed to bring somebody home when you live at home? Like, that's got to be so awkward and weird. And just, especially once you're an adult, like you're not a teenager anymore. Like if you're 30 and like you want to bring somebody home, but like you live with your parents, like what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? But I was surprised that that number was that high, especially the 60% number, because it's always been more of a thing, especially for, I mean, obviously Gen X, boomers, going all the way back to as far back as you want to go. Normally by 35, you were pretty much expected to either be married or however coupled that you wish to be, whether you wish to make it legal or not, that's your business, or living on your own. Like you would be at a point financially where you would be living by yourself, and that's not happening for this generation, apparently. So that really stuck out to me. That struck me as something that was that's I mean, obviously that's a problem if you're not launching, and especially if you're making it to 35 without making it off the launch pad, like you're gonna it's gonna be very hard after that point to get to that point. So that really struck me. But going more into the section, kind of having the discussion of how nowadays masturbation is much more socially acceptable. Like back in the day, like not so much for Gen X, because we kind of, I think we're the ones that kind of really put it out into pop culture that like masturbation is a thing for both men and women. Like we had a whole Seinfeld episode where that was one long running joke. So it's not that way for Gen X per se, but especially for boomers and everybody before that. Like masturbation was like this thing that you did not discuss. Like even if you did it, you sure as hell didn't cop to it or talk about it. And it was always viewed as this like disgusting, dirty thing that if you did it, you were some kind of perv. And especially like if you were a woman, like fucking forget it. Like you didn't, like that didn't even exist. Like as far as anybody knew, women did not ever get themselves off. And if you did, you sure as hell didn't talk about it. And if you were a guy, then you were some kind of gross pervert who's like off jerking off in a corner somewhere, and you're just never going to find a mate and be a suitable person and in society. So now that we have this culture where it's a lot more permissible and it's a lot more open for people to masturbate, young people are doing that. And not that, see, and this is something that I'm trying to figure out. I don't think that it's replacing having sex with somebody per se just in and of itself. I think it's a symptom of a bunch of other things that are happening that are preventing young people from having sex. That like that's, I mean, obviously when you're a teenager you go through puberty, like you start having sexual urges, like that's natural, there's nothing wrong with that. And so you're going to figure out a way to satisfy them one way or the other. And so if you're not having sex with somebody, you're going to be having sex with yourself. So, and she kind of discusses what's going on in Japan, because this is something that Japan, as per usual, is always on the bleeding edge of everything, everywhere, at all times. And so this idea of like masturbation culture, I guess we could call it that there is now like this whole industry in Japan that is solely centered around sexual experiences that don't even like pretend to be a simulation of actual sex. Like there's shops that you can go into. I don't know if you should really call them shops, but there's places where men can go and pay to jerk off in front of the female staff, and they just sit there and watch them. Like there's no sexual contact at all. And they also have, of course, all different sorts of crazy toys and things like that, because Japan. But again, it's that kind of catering to that culture, and something that Japan has been dealing with now for probably at least a decade is this idea of young people not coupling. Like they're not getting married, they're not having babies. And it's contributing to a very huge problem that Japan's having. And Not to climb up on my other hobby horse, but Japan also has very strict immigration laws. So what they're having right now is a plummeting birth rate and no immigration. So it's starting to reach this critical mass where you have people retiring out of the workforce, but there's not enough people to replace them in the workforce. And so it's this push pull thing. And in Japan, like, it's the pressure is unfucking real on young people to get married and have babies. And so I understand the ones that want to like back away and check out of that culture and just be like, oh my god, I can't. But again, there is, because it is now more acceptable to be alone and to have sex with yourself. Now they've got a whole industry cropping up around men just not even attempting to have sex with women. Like, it's strictly masturbation and that's it. So to bring it back stateside, another thing that she talks about in this section is the anti-porn slash anti-masturbation culture that we do have going on in this country, because there is a little bit of a backlash. Like, anti-porn crusaders have been around since the 70s. Like, there's always been that coalition of like super conservative people and like the radical feminists getting together to try to get rid of porn or to marginalize porn or say it's a bad thing. And kind of where that movement is going right now, at least as far on the conservative side, on the radfem side, they approach it from a little bit of a different perspective now. But it's this idea that porn is the problem. Like, porn is replacing actually having, and of course it's always men, because apparently women don't watch porn according to these people, but it's somehow keeping men from actually going out into the world and wanting to meet women and wanting to have sex with women. So you have that, and then you also have the anti-masturbation culture, which, again, this is all centered around men. Like, it's really wild. And obviously the example that is just the most widely used because it's the most widely known is the Proud Boys. And when you join the organization, like, I don't know if you actually physically sign a pledge, but anyway, you promise that as a man, you will only jerk off once a month. Like, that's it. Like, whether you have a woman in your life, you don't have a woman in your life, once a month. Because apparently, again, and also, there's no porn watching. Like, that's verboten. Like, if you are a Proud Boy, you do not watch porn. Like, you have to swear that off. So, again, but it's that same idea of these things are killing your desire to actually go out and be a man and find a woman and have sex and procreate, because that's kind of, well, I mean, that's not what the Proud Boys are about, but they're about traditional Western culture where that's what you're supposed to do, is like you're supposed to go and get married and have babies. Yeah. So it's this weird, it's a really weird culture. Like, and for what it's worth, there's no conclusive clinical proof that any of these things actually diminish the desire of a man to actually go out and find a mate and have sex. Like, there's people who make the argument that porn is addictive, which, I mean, everything's addictive. You could become addicted to anything. It's more to do with your personality than the actual thing in question. And there's no conclusive proof that that's what's happening, that men are foregoing actually going out and meeting women to, have a relationship and to have sex. But before we bounce out of this, I do want to go ahead and discuss the kinds of porn that are popular right now, because I think it kind of refutes the whole idea that these young men are replacing porn for actual sex. And that is that, according to Pornhub, who they do put out a survey every year, they just put out the 2018 one, and these stats haven't changed from 2017. The two most popular searches for the US is number one, lesbian, which it has been for years and years and years and years. And the second one now is hentai. Now, if you don't know what hentai is, allow me to attempt to explain. It's basically the X-rated version of anime. So think anime, but with really, really weird, out there, not even actually physically possible sex. So the two most popular kinds of porn are one that if you are a dude, you cannot engage in. Like if you have a dick, you cannot engage in lesbian sex. And the other one is sex that none of us can engage in because we're not Japanese anime characters and we're not having sex with octopuses or anything that is just hentai is just off the chart wild. Like it's some of this shit is just like, what the fuck were you on when you came up with this? But it's it's sex that's absolutely unattainable for most of the people who are watching it. So again, it's kind of it's really, I mean, it's a theory, but I don't really see anything proving that outside of, before I leave this, just in all fairness, there is a quote from this piece that I want to go ahead and read because I think it does sum this up a little bit. And this is from a 24-year-old male. He's not named in the piece, but the internet has made it so easy to gratify basic social and sexual needs that there's far less incentive to go out into the meat world and chase those things. This isn't to say that the internet can give you more satisfaction than sex or relationships, because it doesn't, but it can supply you with just enough satisfaction to placate those imperatives. I think it's healthy to ask yourself, if I didn't have any of this, would I be going out more? Would I be having sex more? For a lot of people my age, I think the answer is probably yes. Which, this does speak to something that I will discuss a little later because it comes up under a different topic heading. But yeah, I mean, I guess there is something to it, but I don't think that porn or masturbation is the root cause of what's going on here, despite what some people may want to think. But let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. The next topic is hookup culture and helicopter parenting, which, stay with me because these two things do actually kind of go together. And in this section, there was a quote that really summed up hookup culture for me in a way that it's so true, but it's so sad. And it's, one woman has said that we hook up because we have no social skills. We have no social skills because we hook up. And it's just like, you can't argue with that, but it's like, damn, like, what has happened to you young people? What is going on with you people? But yeah, to try to kind of try to unpack this, it was always like this thing in the 90s, especially. It started getting advertised in the media that on college campuses, it was being portrayed as like college was this hotbed of just sexual activity and everybody's fucking everybody and woohoo. But actually, that's not what was happening then, and it's most certainly not what's happening now. Citing from the book American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on Campus by Lisa Wade, she points out, Wade sorts the students she followed into three groups. Roughly 1/3 of those were what she called abstainers. They opted out of hookup culture entirely. A little more than a third were dabblers. They hooked up sometimes, but ambivalently. Less than a quarter were enthusiasts who delighted in hooking up. The remainder were in long-term relationships. So, for the study that Wade did, less than a quarter of the people that she surveyed for this study and that she followed were active participants in quote-unquote hookup culture, which, as far as that goes, the term hookup doesn't necessarily have to mean actual sex. I mean, it can be anything sexually related. That doesn't necessarily mean that actual, like, sex takes place. Like, it could be making out, it can be just anything. But moving on from that, because there's another source I want to cite here, and that is that it's the Ad Health study. In 1995, the large longitudinal study known as Ad Health found that 66% of 17-year-old men and 74% of 17-year-old women had experienced a special romantic relationship in the past 18 months. In 2014, when the Pew Research Center asked 17-year-olds whether they had ever dated hooked up with or otherwise had a romantic relationship with another person, seemingly a broader category than the earlier one, only 46% said yes. So we've gone from in 95, which is a little before I was 17, almost 3/4 of 17-year-olds reported having a romantic relationship with somebody, as opposed to 2015, where it's less than 50% of these 17-year-olds have reported not only not having like a special romantic relationship, but having done anything with somebody else. And that is kind of where the helicopter parenting comes in. Now, back in my day, there were certain things that every teenager kind of wanted to do because it signified, quote unquote, becoming a grown up. And not just in terms of sex, but as far as things as like getting your driver's license and getting a car and having a job and going out on the weekends without your parents, just like going out with your friends. And of course, also having a boyfriend or a girlfriend and having sex with that person was something that was considered like pretty normal, basic stuff. And that is apparently not happening for young kids nowadays. And I look back, like when I was young, like of course by the time I was a senior in high school, like I was already in a relationship, I was already having sex, like I had my driver's license, I had my own car, I had my own job, like I'd already like drank, I'd smoked weed, I'd done other stuff, but I wasn't considered a bad kid either. Like that was just normal shit that kids did back in the 90s. But now it's like kids aren't doing any of those things. And so what's ending up happening is you have these young people who you live in this very cloistered environment when you're helicopter parented. Like everything is so planned out, like to the minute. You've got to be here, you got to be there, you got to be at school, you got to go do these extracurricular activities, you got homework, you got this, you got that, you got all this other shit that you got to do. And so at the end of the day, there's no time to have these experiences that help you transition from being a child to being an adult. So you end up sending these young kids off to college with no experience in how to do like basic stuff, like how to even like schedule your own day or to get yourself places. And obviously, since there's no time in your day, you don't have relationships, like romantic or otherwise. And so as obviously I'm sure everybody remembers when they were a teenager, most teenagers lose their virginity in the context of a relationship. So if the relationship isn't happening, then the sex is not going to be happening. And so that's, again, it's something a lot of people cheer. And I'm like, no, that's kind of a big, important part of learning how to be an adult, is learning how to have and deal with romantic relations and sex. Like that's part of becoming an adult, is learning how to do these things. And it's not happening for these kids. And that, I think, is what's causing the problems, especially sexually on college campuses, because now you've got kids, you've not had sexual experiences with somebody, you don't really know how to form an interpersonal relationship with somebody. You're drinking more than likely, and not only do you not know your tolerances because you've never drank before, but you're drinking God knows what, God knows where, with God knows who, and so you end up in these situations that you're just not mentally equipped to deal with. To pull something from Coddling of the American Mind, which I'm reading right now, they make the argument that 18, 19-year-olds today have the level of like mental preparedness that the rest of us had at like 13, 14 years old. Like you're having these technically adults with mismatched brains in their adult bodies. And so you've got that dichotomy of having an adult, but not mentally adult. So that's where helicopter parenting comes in. It's really done these kids a huge disservice, I think, in not allowing them to grow up and become adults and to learn how to handle your shit. Because I mean, these are things that you have to know when you're out in the world. You have to know how to handle yourself. And if everything has been perfectly planned out for you and everything is just safe and everything's in this little tiny bubble and nothing bad ever happens and you don't ever have any interpersonal relationships and you don't have any romantic relationships and you never have sex, then it's how are you ever supposed to learn the skills needed to do anything, especially anything involving sex? Like, it's no wonder. It's no fucking wonder. But on the topic of helicopter parenting, the second point that she makes, and this made me sad to see as women, especially because it seems like a lot of these people that she interviewed were women, talk about relationships having been presented to them by their parents as some kind of impediment, like something to be avoided until after you have done XYZ, like till after you graduate high school and you graduate college and you get your advanced degrees, you get established in a career, you do all this other stuff, and then you can start pursuing relationships. And I'm like, well, by the time you do all that shit, you're going to be pushing 30. So you're supposed to wait until you're 30 to start trying to figure out how to have a romantic relationship with somebody? What? Like, that's going to be so awful. Like, just that attitude that relationships are something to be avoided because God forbid something might happen to knock these poor children off of this carefully curated life plan. And I'm just like, it's going to happen regardless. Like, something's going to knock you off that carefully curated life plan. It's cute when you're 18 and you think you got it all figured out. Because trust me, shit's going to happen. It's going to throw you for a loop. And if you're not mentally equipped to deal with that, then yeah, you're going to have anxiety, depression, all of this shit that you see in kids because you've not been given the skills needed to cope with life. So, moving on to the next topic, and that is the Tinder mirage. Now, before we get too far into this, I have to admit my own biases. Tinder creeps me out on like an almost cellular level. Like, I cannot begin to fucking imagine putting yourself through that. Like, oh my god, it's so reductive. Like, that's just the worst way to try to find a partner ever. Like, it's gross to me in a way. And I know I'm a child of the 90s, and obviously back then, if you said, I met somebody online and I'm going to go meet them in person, people would look at you like you lost your fucking mind. Like, are you trying to get yourself killed? But now it's so common and everybody does it, and it's still, no. I'm a meet space kind of girl. I don't want to try to meet a partner online, and I certainly don't want to do it through an app where you swipe right and swipe left and treat people like they're shoes or jeans or just something you're trying to buy on the internet, and not as like a whole human being that is something more than a couple of pictures and a blurb. Like, it's just, I don't like it. And I think it's really done quite a lot of damage to the ability to actually find somebody that you can actually connect with. Because, first off, the point that is made in this piece is that a lot of people seem to play Tinder like it's like Candy Crush or something. Like, there's a lot of swiping going on, but there's not a lot of texting going on. And even when there's texting going on, there's not necessarily meeting up going on. So it really seems to me like it's some kind of giant time suck. Like, that's what Twitter's for, people. Twitter's your time suck. Don't go on Tinder. Don't do that. But yeah, it's just, that kind of surprised me because to me, it's like, well, why would you be on a dating app if you're not trying to find a date? But apparently there's plenty of people on there who are just on there just to fuck around. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. That makes it even worse to me. It's like, it's not like you have people out there that are genuinely trying to find like a partner, and now you've got people that are just like swiping on them and like, oh my god, no. Just fire Tinder. Just get rid of Tinder. Like, it's just not doing anything remotely productive as far as I'm concerned. And what was interesting that she found when she was talking to, again, a lot of women, and this is one of those places where I do think Tinder and online dating has done a massive amount of damage, and that is these young girls wishing that they could find somebody the quote unquote old fashioned way. Like, you're just out, you're living your life, you meet a guy, you keep bumping into each other in the elevator, or you meet at a bookstore. Just like normal shit, like all of us tended to find our mates, like just living our lives. But the flip side of that is that now it's seen as almost like borderline stalkerish to walk up to somebody and just talk to them in person, and just to even say like hi or ask somebody out for a drink or something like that is like almost like, it's like you can't even do that anymore. Like, it's not okay. Like, you might get maced. So there is that dichotomy of what it seems like these young women want versus what has now been made socially acceptable because of apps like Tinder and because of meeting people online. Now meeting people in real life is like seen as this bizarre fucking creepy thing that only weirdos do. And it's like, so now you can't even like talk to another person. Anyway, moving on a little bit. Another reason that a lot of people cited for using sites like Tinder and stuff like that is wanting to remove the ambiguity between, like, if you ask somebody out, like, are we going out on a date, or are we friends, or like, what is this? And just kind of wanting to, in my view, like, commodify. Maybe commodify is not the right word, but you kind of understand what I'm saying. Like, you're trying to turn this into a more transactional thing. And again, this kind of goes back to the idea of meeting people in meat space and it being now gross and weird and creepy. You young kids, when you're doing this, you're skipping kind of the best part of the beginning of a relationship. Like, you're taking the part in the beginning where everything is like fun and sexy and exciting. And I know it's probably a little nerve-wracking to be like, I like this guy, does he like me? Or I like this girl, does she like me back? But when you get that like affirmation, like when somebody is in front of you and it's like, oh my god, I'm into this person and they're into me, like, that is a rush like none other. And you guys keep wanting to skip over that part because y'all some socially awkward motherfuckers. Stop being socially awkward. Like, it's okay. Like, sometimes you're going to get rejected. Sometimes it's going to happen to your face. Yeah, it sucks, but yes, it's part of life. And the flip side of that is you miss out on that pain, but then again, you also miss out on the potential pleasure of having that moment and having that like actual human connection with somebody else where it's like, yes, we're into each other. Like, this is a date and this is so awesome. And you guys, you young people, I don't understand you sometimes. And on the topic of ambiguity in relationships, you young people seem to have it completely fucking backwards as to when ambiguity is okay and when it's not okay. Because if, like, okay, so you want to eliminate all the ambiguity at the beginning of the relationship. Like, you want everything to be like super transactional and know where everybody stands. But god damn if y'all won't put up with some ambiguity when you're in a relationship. Like, Julian was sitting in on this class called Marriage 101. It's over at Northwestern University. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this class, and it fills up like super duper quick, like almost immediately. And the point of it is to teach young people how to be in relationships, like how normal, well-adjusted people act around other normal, well-adjusted people. And it came up, and I've seen this come up too. I tend to be a bit of an advice column junkie, and I read these advice columns sometimes. And just the level of ambiguity that young people are willing to put up with in a relationship is unreal. Like, when she was sitting in it on this class, they were talking about like defining a relationship. And so many of these women were like, well, I'm in a monogamous relationship with this dude, but he's not really calling me his girlfriend, and I don't really call him my boyfriend. And the instructor made a really good point to try to illustrate like where you stand in relationship to somebody else. And she asked them like, okay, if one of you is got the flu, is the other one bringing soup? And a lot of people were not getting soup. And so I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Like, there's, and to bring it back to the advice columns, one that stuck out with me, and I mean, this is so long ago, I don't even think I could go back and find it for you guys. But this one woman was writing in that she had been in a relationship with a dude for 6 years. 6 fucking years, and never had a conversation about where they were at or where this relationship was going. Like, no, like the ambiguity is supposed to be at the beginning of the relationship, not in the middle of the relationship. That's when you're supposed to, like, have it figured out, like, what you are to this person. So, yeah, just backwards. You guys got it backwards. But lest you think that the landscape is just a hellscape for everybody who uses online dating apps, there is one group of people for whom it has worked out beautifully, and that is for the LGBTQ community. For obvious reasons. Like, most people in the world are heterosexual, so if you are a woman and you want to walk up to a man and say hi and try to express interest, you're pretty safe, and vice versa. But if you're a man and you want to walk up to another man, like, okay, now you're really rolling the dice, because you really don't know like what the reaction's gonna be. So if you, as a gay or a lesbian person, you have an app you can go on, and then everybody else on the app is also of your sexual orientation, that takes care of a huge thing right off the rip for those people. So the LGBTQ community is having great success on online dating apps, because obviously that's a huge help for them. Like, it really eliminates a lot of the problems that gay and lesbian people and bisexuals and transgenders and all of the other genders and all the other letters have in trying to meet people like in real life. Like, you remove that fear of approaching somebody who may not take your approaches in the spirit that they were intended, and this could possibly end in physical harm. So I'm happy for them. Like, I'm glad it's working out for somebody. Just for us heteros, it just does not seem to be working out all that well. To move on to the next topic that Julian found, and that is bad sex. In parentheses, painfully bad. Now, I want to go ahead and start this out by reading a quote from the actual piece itself. And this is about Debbie Herbenek, who is a sex researcher, and she has done research on this. Some of Herbenek's most sobering research concerns the prevalence of painful sex. In 2012, 30% of women said they had experienced pain the last time they had vaginal intercourse. During anal intercourse, 72% had. Whether or not these rates are representing an increase, we have no basis for comparison. They are troublingly high. Moreover, most women don't tell their partners about their pain. Janice Fortenberry, the chief of adolescent medicine at Indiana University's medical school and a co-leader of the NSHB, believes that many girls and women have internalized the idea that physical comfort goes with being female. Now, I should hope this would go without saying for anybody who is listening to this, but I will say it because apparently it does not. Sex should not hurt. Sex should not be painful. If it is, you are well within your rights to ask the person who you are having sex with to stop, to modify whatever you need to modify. If something is going on and you have sex or you have pain every time you have sex, please go see a doctor, get yourself checked out. This goes for men and women, because that is an indicator that there could be something very, very wrong. So don't feel like you have to grin and bear it. Don't feel like it's something that you have to endure. And like I said, if it is something that happens every time, please go see a doctor. Make sure that there isn't an underlying issue going on that you need to have addressed. To go back to the piece for a minute, because this is the second part of this section that bothers me deeply. A particularly vivid illustration of this comes from Lucia O'Sullivan, a University of New Brunswick psychology professor, who has published research documents documenting high rates of sexual dysfunction among adolescents and young adults. That work grew out of a lunch several years ago with a physician from the university's Student Health Center, who told O'Sullivan that she was deeply concerned by all the vulvar fissures she and her colleagues were seeing in their student patients. These women weren't reporting rape, but the condition of their genitals showed that they were enduring intercourse that was literally undesired. They were having sex they didn't want to, weren't aroused by, O'Sullivan said. The physician told her that the standard of care was to hand the women KY jelly and send them on their way. Now, there's not a lot that anybody could have done for these girls in a clinical setting, but ladies, gentlemen, whatever you happen to identify as, you do not have to have sex that you don't want to be having. Like, if you are not turned on, don't feel like you have to have sex. Like, I just, this bothers me so much, because the boomer generation and the Gen X generation put in so much work on this, as far as making it known publicly for all the world to know that no, the female orgasm is not a myth, and yes, women can enjoy sex, and women should be enjoying sex, and it's not something that you should have to just sit there and grit your teeth through anymore, but something that you have every right to enjoy as much as men do. And just seeing that we've regressed back to this idea that you have to, like, just grit your teeth and get through it, and to have sex that, like, you don't want, like, you're not physically aroused enough to be having sex that's not going to damage you, and like, that's like, you really don't want that. Like, that can actually lead to some very big problems. So that really bothered me. Like, where did this all go wrong? We put in so much work. Where did it all go wrong? And I don't really have an answer for that, but outside of maybe this whole overparenting thing and not leaving kids enough time to have relationships and to have sex, means that, especially for women, they're not figuring out, like, what it is that actually turns them on. Like, I joke about this, and I only say it half jokingly, and that's that young men learn everything they know about sex from porn, and young women learn everything they know about sex from 50 Shades. And I see it in these pieces that keep coming out. Like, specifically, I'm thinking about the Aziz Ansari piece and that Catwoman piece from the New Yorker. And the thing that struck me about both of those pieces and the women in them was, it seemed like they were of the opinion that sex is something that is done to you, not something that you do with somebody else. Like, the level of non-involvement from the women in those sexual stories really creeped me the fuck out, to be completely honest. Like, I was like, that was the thing that made me cringe the most about both of those, because it was just like, ladies, no, go advocate for yourself. Like, get in there, like, figure out, like, let a dude know. But there seems to be this idea that, again, like this 50 Shades idea, that if you meet the right guy, he's just going to automatically know exactly what to do and when to do it, and when to touch you and where to touch you, and he's just going to know how to make you come with no input from you. And that's not how this works. Like, you got to kind of tell them things. So there's that. And then there's also, like, this idea of porn being used as an instruction manual. Now, back in my day, we did not have the access to porn that young people do now. Like, everybody's got phones, everybody's got fast internet. Just, we had to make do with, like, dial-up modems in, like, computers that were in public places. So we didn't watch quite as much porn as the young people do nowadays. But I think that coupled with not actually having very many like IRL sexual experiences has led to this idea that porn is real in a way, or at least real enough to where especially these young women are thinking that the things that are done in porn are the things that they are supposed to be enjoying, which no, porn is fantasy. Like, it's fine to watch it and to maybe get some ideas and kind of go from there, but as like a straight up instruction of like, okay, if you are a woman, you are supposed to like this, and this, in this pattern and in this time frame, and that's not no, that's not how this works either. But the two sex acts that seem to be the most becoming prevalent because of porn watching are anal and choking. Yeah, so let me go ahead and read a pull quote from the piece because this, I was like, what in the actual fuck? Cicely Maston of the London School of Hygiene and Topical Medicine found that teenage boys experimenting with anal sex, perhaps influenced by what they've seen in porn, may find that sudden, unlubricated penetration is much more difficult than it looks and more agonizing for the recipient. Some of her subjects appear to have pressured their partners. Others seem to have resorted to what another researcher described to me, clinically, as non-consensual substitution of anal for vaginal sex. Yeah. And we also have a discussion about choking, and apparently a lot of people not realizing that you have to ask for permission to do that. And so I'm reading this and I'm thinking like, okay, hold on. We have a consent culture now. For if you want to move your hand 3 inches to the left, you have to ask permission for that. And everybody who is young seems to be somewhat on board with this. But, and I'm sorry, I can't think of any other way to put this, but you understand the concept that you have to ask for permission to move your hand, but you don't understand that you have to ask permission before you put your dick in somebody's ass or put your hands around their throat? Really? That's the shit you need consent for. That's the shit you have to ask. That is the kind of shit where you have to have discussions, plural discussions, before engaging in that kind of sexual activity. Because, I mean, especially with anal, like, again, gonna keep it on this side of TMI, but yeah, there's some discussions that you need to have before then. And most certainly before you bring choking into this. That's something where you can really hurt somebody. Like, you need to make sure somebody's, first of all, cool with it. Second of all, you gotta establish a framework in which that if shit is not going great for the other person, they have some way to tell you that it is not. Like, you can't just bust that shit out. Like, you gotta ask. You gotta have a conversation. You have to have, like, preparations. You can't just do that. Especially not with somebody you don't know and you're not like a partner with, like, not just some rando person. Like, what the fuck? What the hell, young people? I don't understand you sometimes. But moving on, because I could sit here and yell at you about that all night. But here's where I think that hookup culture is not really helping anybody. And just as a disclaimer, if you want to have one night stands, go ahead, do you. But what is ending up happening is if you keep having these just one-off experiences with one person after another, you're not ever going to be with somebody who you are going to feel comfortable enough exploring your sexuality with. And I think that is really what's becoming a problem for young people in general, but especially for women. Like, you have to be with somebody that you trust to explore yourself sexually and to have the kind of sex where somebody is eventually going to get to know you and know what you like and what you don't like. And so that is going to lead to better sex. Like, just chasing one-off experiences, you're never going to get what you're looking for. And I think I mean, there's a lot of backlash to hookup culture, and that can be a whole nother discussion in and of itself. But that is my warning on this. Is like if you're going to do that, I mean, I hope you know what you're getting into, and I hope you're being realistic about what you're going to get out of it, because it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. And yeah, I think it's like stunting emotional growth in a way, because again, it enables you to not have to have an emotional connection with another person, which is not ideal. Like, you have to learn how to do that at some point in your life. So, moving on to the last topic that she cites, and that is inhibition. Now, I went to Iceland last year, and we stayed in Reykjavik. And of course, when you go to Reykjavik, you eventually go to the Blue Lagoon, which is, it's like a lagoon. Like, obviously, I don't think I have to explain that. But the idea in Iceland, and this is how, let me explain to you how it works at Blue Lagoon versus how it works at like the local like swim place that you can go to, because they have them open year round. Like, we went in winter, and like you could go like to the pool or to the hot tubs, and there was like this little one in the neighborhood. But anyway, what you're supposed to do is you get completely naked, like everything off, no swimsuit, no nothing, and then you go into the showers and you like head to toe wash, like you wash your hair, you wash your body, and then you go back out and put on your swimsuit. And they expect you to do this because of obviously hygiene reasons. Like, they want to make sure like you're clean and stuff. So at Blue Lagoon, you can kind of like fake your way out of it. At the local one, there was actually a woman stationed in the locker room whose job was to make sure that you were naked when you went in that shower. So obviously, you were expected to engage in semi-public nudity. And it made me think about, when the hell was the last time that I engaged in semi-public nudity? And it'd been a while. Like, probably, I mean, not even high school. Like, probably before that. Like, I really couldn't remember when I'd been just like completely naked around just complete strangers in a non-medical environment. But that is something that this touches on, that this idea that millennials and the younger generation are not used to being naked in front of other people. Like, it just, there's really no occasions anymore. Like, it's not like back in school when you had gym class and then you had to shower after that, and then obviously you were like naked around people and stuff like that. And even when you go to the gym now, it's like everybody has their little shower stalls, and you don't really undress until you get in the shower stall, and then you have your towel on and everything. So there's really no instance where you have to be naked in front of strangers unless you want to be. And so now it's like this awkwardness about being naked, period, even in front of somebody who you're wanting to have sex with. And kind of two main things that are responsible for that is social media. Obviously, if you are on Instagram, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And porn. Because both social media and porn do portray these very unrealistic standards of both female and male attractiveness, like what you're supposed to look like. And first of all, Instagram is fake as fuck. Like, nobody looks like that. Nobody's life is like that. It's this curated look into somebody's life, and it's photoshopped, it's filtered, it's fucking fake. Like, it's like looking at ads now. Like, the same way you wouldn't look at an ad in Vogue and be like, yeah, that's what this woman really looks like. That's what Instagram is now. In the same way for men, especially men who watch porn, like, you get this idea that as a man, you're supposed to look a certain way. Like, you're supposed to have a certain amount of body hair, and it's supposed to be like landscaped in a certain way. And of course, your dick is supposed to be a certain size. And so if you don't measure up, like, men have insecurities too. It's not just women. So when you're a man and you're like, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, well, I don't look like dude from porn, it kind of fucks with you, you know? But again, it's one of those that's just, I don't know how you guys get past that. Just be naked, or just start around your house. Just walk naked around your house. Like, nobody has to see you. Just start getting comfortable with being naked all by yourself. But the part about this section that really did kind of make me sad is that because of this inhibition and this not wanting to be naked and not wanting to have certain people put their faces too close to other body parts on you, is a lot of young women are very squeamish about receiving oral because they feel like that part of their body is ugly and they're self-conscious about being naked like that and having, somebody's face in between your legs. And so they don't enjoy oral because they're stuck on being uncomfortable about their bodies, which is sad. Like it's sad to think that you can't just relax and let go and enjoy something. And just, ladies, if there is any piece of advice I could ever give you in this area, it's that yes, we all look at ourselves naked and we see the things. We see our perceived flaws. That's not how men view us when we are naked. They're not looking at the flaws. They're looking at the parts that they want to look at and they like what they see. So try to just take a step back, take a deep breath, and understand that, like, it's just try to get out of your head a little bit. Just a little bit of a step back and understand that if a man wants to have sex with you, it's because he likes what he sees. And if a man wants to go down on you, clearly he's okay with having his face all in your cooch area. So just try to let the body hang-ups go just for a little while, okay? Just try it for me. But I think that pretty much, well, actually, you know what? No, because there is another level of the inhibition thing, and that is more of a mental thing. And that's kind of speaks to like a lot of depression and anxiety that a lot of young people face, but there is this kind of not entirely making sense of the fact that we live in a rather unprecedentedly safe time in history. Like, as far as the evolution of human history, human beings don't really face a lot of the dangers that we have faced in the past, but people are so afraid of things, and it kind of doesn't make sense. But of course, when you have anxiety, when you have depression, that's pretty much a sexual buzzkill. And on top of that, if you're taking medication for anxiety and depression, that just adds on top of that, because usually one of the side effects is decreased sexual appetite. So you kind of get stuck in that loop of just not being able to get out of your own head enough to enjoy sex. That's another one. I don't really know how to fix that other than to try to deprogram these young people from what they've been programmed to believe, that the world is this awful, horrible, dangerous place where just danger lurks around every corner and you have to be constantly on guard, because you don't. Like, that's not, especially even if you go back, like, not even super far back in the history, but even if you go back to like the 70s, like, that was a way more dangerous time than we are in right now, and people were a hell of a lot less stressed out about it. So I don't know how you go about deprogramming that out of people, but I think that would be the first step to trying to get people kind of off the anxiety meds and the depression meds, and trying to kind of regulate a little better without that. I want to go ahead and wrap this up by reading one of the last paragraphs in the piece, because when I read this paragraph really hit home for me. When, over the course of my reporting, people in their 20s shared with me their hopes and fears and inhibitions, I sometimes felt pangs of recognition. Just as often, though, I was taken aback by what seemed like heartbreaking changes in the way many people were relating, or not relating, to one another. I am not so very much older than the people I talked to for this story, and yet I feel like I had the sense of being from a different time. Boy, can I relate to that. There was a tweet going around yesterday. It was from a couple days ago, but it's this tweet about how some millennials, but especially the younger generation, are now going to these classes to learn like basic life skills, like how to cook, how to do budgets, how to balance a checkbook, like basically how to adult, basically. And I just looked at that and I'm like, the way kids were raised in the generations after mine is so radically different than how I was raised and everybody before me that I think that until you can acknowledge that fact, understanding anything else that's going on right now is going to be very difficult. Like, that's the aha moment, that understanding that the younger generations were not raised the way we were. Like, they were raised in a completely different mindset of just this bubble wrapped safety must keep you safe and well and get you on this correct path so that you can have the best life possible, and it's so very fucking important, and if it doesn't happen then your life is just going to go to shit and you're going to be nothing and it's going to be horrible, horrible, horrible. And it's like, no, just take a step back and breathe, guys. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But I want to go ahead and wrap this up on that note. If you did make it this far, as always, thank you. And if you did like it, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.